Have you ever wondered what lurks in the heart of the woods? In the snowy mountains of Vermont, the winters can be cruel, and the isolation all-consuming. This was home to Sam, a forest ranger living a solitary existence. His home, a humble log cabin, was nestled deep within the heart of an ancient forest, a place that was as much a part of him as he was of it. Sam was a man of the woods, his life rhythm intertwined with the ebb and flow of the seasons. He was a guardian of the timberland, a sentinel of the wilderness. His days were filled with tasks that kept him connected to the wild, checking animal traps, marking trails, and ensuring the safety of the woodland creatures. But it wasn't a life for the faint of heart. The winters were harsh, with snow piling high and an icy wind that seemed to come from the very marrow of the woods. Sam was alone, but he wasn't lonely. The forest was his companion, the rustling leaves his music, and the creatures his neighbors. He found solace in the solitude, strength in the silence, but everything has a price. As the snow accumulated, hardened by the icy wind, Sam's isolation grew deeper. The forest was a world of its own, a world where Sam was the sole human inhabitant. But even in his solitude, Sam was passionate about his job. He had a bond with the forest, a connection that was almost spiritual. He respected the wilderness and its inhabitants, understanding that he was merely a visitor in their realm. His cabin, modest but cozy, was his sanctuary, a place where he could retreat from the harsh elements, a place that was uniquely his. But one fateful winter night, Sam's world was about to change. As he was making his usual rounds, checking his animal traps under the ghostly glow of the moon, he stumbled upon something that defied explanation. Something that would shatter his solitude and replace it with a chilling terror that would forever haunt the depths of the Vermont woods. In the dead of winter, in the heart of the woods, Sam found a creature unlike anything he'd ever seen. The air was thick with frost, and every breath seemed to echo through the silence. The creature lay there, lifeless, yet unnerving. It was as large as a bear, but its limbs were twisted and grotesque, like the branches of an old, gnarled tree. Its skin, a gruesome display of thick, scaly crust, seemed to have a life of its own, shivering under the cold moonlight. In places, the crust gave way to reveal raw, purulent flesh, oozing a sickening, putrid stench. The creature bore a chilling resemblance to a human, but its form was distorted, corrupted into a repugnant mockery of nature. Its features were grotesque, almost beyond recognition, but unmistakably humanoid. Sam shivered, but not from the cold, his heart pounding in his chest as he took in the horrifying sight. He tried to dismiss it, to convince himself that it was merely the decomposing body of some unknown animal, a victim of the harsh winter. Perhaps a bear, he thought, or a large wolf, its body contorted by the ravages of decay. But deep down, he knew that this was no ordinary creature. Its two human eyes, now vacant and staring, held a disturbing familiarity that gnawed at his sanity. Sam turned away, forcing himself to leave the unsettling spectacle behind. But as he trudged through the snow, the image of the creature remained etched in his mind, its grotesque form haunting his thoughts. He tried to shake it off, to lose himself in the routine of his duties, but the creature refused to be forgotten. Back in the safety of his cabin, he found no respite. Every creak of the wooden beams, every rustle of the wind outside, seemed to echo the creature's twisted form. His dreams were invaded by its haunting image, its vacant eyes staring back at him from the darkness. But as the days passed, the creature invaded his thoughts, its image haunting his every waking moment. Something was wrong. Sam could feel it in his bones. The tranquil solitude that once blanketed the woods of Vermont now seemed to be teeming with an unseen, lurking presence. The forest, which had always been his sanctuary, now felt like an alien landscape, hostile and fraught with danger. The strange, inanimate creature he had stumbled upon days ago had etched itself into his mind. Its grotesque humanoid appearance was a stark contrast to the natural beauty of the wilderness. It was as if the creature was a blight, a corruption that was slowly seeping into the very heart of the forest. One day Sam began hearing strange noises. There was a sinister crackling that echoed through the trees, as if the woods themselves were groaning under some invisible weight. It was a distant sound, always just out of sight, but it was there, following him, haunting his every step. Then came the visions. They were fleeting, like shadows dancing at the edge of his vision. More than once, he thought he saw the creature lurking amongst the trees, its misshapen form blending into the wilderness. Each time he turned to look, there was nothing there. But the feeling of being watched, of being hunted, was always there. His nights were filled with the echo of filthy howls that shattered the peace of the mountain. They were bone-chilling, filled with a primal terror that seemed to seep into his very soul. Sleep became a distant memory as each night was filled with the dread of those haunting cries. His anxiety began to mount. The calm and composed forest ranger was now a shadow of his former self. He was constantly on edge, his eyes darted around nervously, his hands trembled, and his heart pounded in his chest like a wild drum. He was no longer the hunter, but the hunted. Then one evening, when he returned home, he saw it, the creature. It was waiting for him. Standing in the middle of a clearing, its twisted form silhouetted against the setting sun, it was a vision of horror brought to life. It was the beginning of a nightmare that would consume him. The haunting had truly begun. Sam was no longer alone in the woods. The creature had found him. A chill had settled in the air, but it was not the biting cold of winter that sent shivers down Sam's spine. It was fear. Fear of the grotesque figure that lurked in the shadows, always watching, always waiting. In the heart of the ancient forest, the once comforting solitude of his cabin had transformed into a prison. Each creak of the timbers, each rustle of the leaves outside, sent waves of terror coursing through him. Sam was a prisoner, trapped in his own mind, tormented by the thing that stalked him. His days became a blur of paranoia. The woods he once knew like the back of his hand had morphed into a labyrinth of dread. Every tree seemed to conceal a lurking menace, every shadow a threat. Sam tried to convince himself it was all in his head, a figment of his overactive imagination, but the creature was real. It was out there. Sam's refuge, once a haven of peace, now echoed with the perpetual clatter of his own frantic heartbeat. He began to fortify his cabin, barricading the doors, shuttering the windows. The sunlight was shut out, replaced by the dull glow of a flickering oil lamp. But no amount of wood or iron could keep out the creeping terror that gnawed at his sanity. The nights were the worst. The inky blackness outside seemed to press against the walls of the cabin, heavy with anticipation. The silence was eerie, broken only by the occasional howl that pierced the stillness, a chilling reminder of the horror that lurked just beyond his door. The isolation gnawed at him, twisting his thoughts, pushing him to the brink of madness. His sleep was fitful and troubled, haunted by nightmares of the creature. He could see it in his dreams, its grotesque form illuminated by the cold moonlight, its empty eye sockets staring into his soul. In his despair, Sam lost track of time. Days turned into nights, nights into days, in an endless cycle of fear. The creature seemed to be everywhere and nowhere, an omnipresent spectre that haunted his every waking moment. And then, one morning, the silence was shattered by a knock on the door. The knocking was incessant, a constant reminder of the horror waiting outside. Each knock was a blow to Sam's sanity, a chilling echo in the silence of his fortress turned prison. The wooden door, once a symbol of refuge, now stood as the only barrier between him and the monstrous entity. Every knock seemed to grow louder, more desperate, intensifying the dread that gripped Sam's heart. The cabin walls, once a sanctuary, now felt like they were closing in on him. The knocking echoed through the room, a rhythmic nightmare that played on repeat, drumming a terrifying melody into Sam's consciousness. His mind raced, his heart pounded in his chest, his breath became ragged and uneven as the knocks grew more violent, more insistent. He could almost feel the splinters of wood piercing his skin as the creature outside pounded with a force that threatened to shatter his last line of defense. Then with a crash, the door gave way. The creature stood in the doorway, its gaping mouth revealing a darkness beyond comprehension. A monstrous figure, an embodiment of terror, it loomed ominously over Sam, its twisted limbs casting horrifying shadows across the room. Sam's heart pounded in his chest, a drumbeat echoing his impending doom. He could taste the fear in his mouth, bitter and sharp. A scream ripped through the silence of the cabin, a raw, guttural sound that he barely recognized as his own. The echo of his terror hung heavy in the air, a tangible testament to the dread that had consumed him. His vocal cords strained, aching with the effort, but all he could do was scream. Scream as the creature lunged towards him, its gaping maw a vortex of unimaginable horror. Darkness descended, an inky cloak swallowing the light, swallowing Sam. The scream was cut short, a chilling silence replacing the cacophony of fear. And then there was silence. Silence and the unanswered question, what happened to Sam?